This channel's gonna be so chaotic. Hi everyone, my name is Ivy and I read and write books. I don't know why I didn't think about starting a booktube sooner, but here we are. Nobody panic, I'm in training. This is the first time I've ever filmed with anything that's not my phone. So my first time filming with like a good DSLR camera or a vlogging camera, figuring out lighting and tripods and camera height. We're working on it. I'm learning, we're gonna get through this together. So just bear with me. But I thought I would start off with the BookTube Newbie Tag, and I have all of the questions here. So question number 1 is, when did you start/fall in love with reading? Honestly, I've always been a reader. I've always loved storytelling. Even as a child, I always wanted bedtime stories read to me. I always wanted stories told to me. I didn't care if they came from a book or if they were made up. And I'm still that way. I have a lot of chronic illnesses. So anytime I'm sick or in pain and don't feel good, I just want something to distract me, and my husband will grab one of my favorite books off the shelf and he will read to me until his voice breaks, and he has done that before. Even now, I still fall asleep better when I'm listening to like the bedtime story guided meditation. I don't know why, it's just always been so relaxing to me. In middle school, I was the person that I had an eating disorder, so I never really ate lunch anyway, but I would skip lunch and go spend my lunch period in the library. I was the person that I always had a book in my purse, not my backpack, although I did have several in my backpack, but in my purse, and I'm still that way. Although now it's usually my Kindle that goes with me. I've always loved stories. I've always loved reading, and it is something that connects me to my mom. The very first Harry Potter book came out in the US when I was about 3 years old, and my mom would read those to me as bedtime stories. My mom's only tattoo is a matching Hogwarts acceptance letter. We have them in the same spot on the backs of our left shoulders. It's her only tattoo, and it's the only one that she's ever gonna get, and it is so special that it is something that she shares with me. So regardless of how horrible the author is, those are always gonna be heart books for me because they connect me to something so special from my childhood, and they connect me to my mother. Moving into high school, I was still the same way. I always had books, not as much because I got into a lot more extracurriculars, but I always had books with me. Into college, I went to a college that was one of those, it doesn't matter how hard you work, you're still not going to pass the classes. So naturally, I didn't read a lot in college unless it was for my classes. I was trying so hard to stay afloat, and I didn't get back into reading regularly until about 10-ish years ago. I went right back into fantasy, just what I had read when I was in middle school and high school. I was a very unrestricted reader. Now, that being said, you raise your kids however you want. I'm not here to tell you what is and isn't correct, what kids should and shouldn't read. That is up to you as a parent. I'm just very thankful that I was We done? It's New Year's Eve. It's not even dark, and the celebrations are already starting. Refocus. What was I saying? Unrestricted reader. That's what I was saying. I was reading Lord of the Rings and Anne Rice in middle school. Then again, my mom is also the one that introduced me to 50 Cent when I was in elementary school, but I loved that I was an unrestricted reader. I never had to wonder if something was appropriate for me to be reading. It allowed me to ask questions. It allowed me to understand what is and is not real, but it also allowed my creativity to grow. And I do attribute the fact that I grew up to be an author to the fact that I was allowed to read whatever I wanted. I think my family just kind of took the mindset of, at least she's reading, like it could be worse. As a result, I never had to worry about whether something was correct, whether something was taboo. If I had questions, I could ask, and if I felt like I couldn't ask a question, I had access to books that could give me the answers. I also feel like they wanted me to experience life a little more unrestricted because I went to a private elementary school where I was very sheltered. So moving into a public school system in middle school and high school was a culture shock and a half. And I feel like at that point they were just like, well, whatever she doesn't read in books, she's gonna be experiencing anyway. I live in a not great area, okay? I would even go so far as to call it ghetto, and that's not just me. You ask anyone from this area, they will tell you the same thing. And I have definitely seen and experienced some things. I don't think they were very worried about what was going on in the books that I was reading. But I still read pretty appropriate books, I feel like, for that age, aside from Anne Rice. But I read like Twilight, and I was obsessed with I was the vampire girl. Actually, a lot of people signed my yearbook as Vampire Queen. I read Twilight, I read Cirque du Freak, like I read everything vampire that I could get my hands on. So of course, I read Queen of the Damned, The Vampire Lestat, all of that. But I still tried to read things that I got from like my school library. Question 2, how/where do you read? Literally everywhere. First things first. I always have a physical book with me. My physical book that I'm reading right now actually doesn't fit in here because I'm reading Quicksilver and it's very thick and it won't fit in here. But this still goes with me because in here I have some annotating supplies. These are transparent sticky notes and some tabs. I have some pens in here, and then I also have my book light. I often have to drive my husband to work and go pick him up from work, which I have to do as soon as I finish filming this. And when he closes, I'm stuck sitting in the dark and I don't want to run the battery down on my car, so I always have my book light, which, let me show you, is super cute. I got this book light from the TikTok shop. So this is what it looks like. It slides open. This looks like it would damage your pages. It doesn't. The head of it swivels so I can turn it exactly where I need the light focused on. I can adjust the brightness and I can adjust the type of light. So I can do cool light, warm light, or a combination of the two. I can adjust the brightness of it. And what I ended up doing, I took a bunch of nail stickers and I just decorated it to give it a little more personality. One other cool thing about it, it's USB rechargeable. So I love this thing. It goes with me everywhere. But so does my Kindle. I learned my lesson, people. My Kindle goes with me absolutely everywhere. It goes with me when I go get my nails done. I actually just got the MagSafe R stand, so I can switch out my pop socket and I can have the R stand on there, and I can just, instead of leaning it up against their lamp, it'll have its own little kickstand. And I always take my Kindle page turner with me, and that way I can press the button with my elbow while I'm getting my nails done, and I can read through my whole nail appointment. I even got the viral TikTok like Kindle belt bag because when I go out doing stuff, like when we go to the zoo, to the museum, to the aquarium, to NASA, anything like that, I'm not taking my big heavy purse and lugging that around with me when we go out and do stuff like that. So normally I would just take a little wristlet where I have my phone, my wallet, my keys, my asthma inhaler, and you know, we're good to go. But my Kindle would not fit in the one that I had. So, little story time. I had to convince my in-laws that I was not completely obsessed with my phone. My husband and I got married kind of during the pandemic. He's from Australia. He immigrated here legally. We have the paperwork to prove it. But when borders reopened, we were separated on 2 different continents for almost 2 years, and it was the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my life. But when his visa was approved and he was able to come here, he was able to get a travel exemption because he was going to be leaving Australia and not going back. His family and friends obviously could not do the same. So our wedding took place on a beach. It was just me, my husband, my mother and grandmother, 2 family friends that were allowing us to use their beach house, our photographer, our 2 videographers, our officiant, and our officiant's assistants, and that was it. So when his parents visited the US for the first time, they came and stayed with us for a week. We did all the things with them, took them to all the places, and then we also took them to the beach where we got married. Now, we got married in February. They came and visited us in June. On the beach. Naturally, it was horrendously busy, and we had to wait for a very long time to get on the ferry to go to that beach. And that was the day that I forgot my Kindle. Thankfully, I have the Kindle app on my phone. I was able to just pull it up and it synced right to the page that I left off on. But after I had been staring at my phone for about 20 minutes, I was like, they probably think I'm completely obsessed with it and that I'm just doom scrolling. And I was like, I promise you, I'm not one of those people that's obsessed with their phone. I'm just reading. And they get it because we're all readers. But still, that was an awkward conversation to have. So I fixed that problem as soon as I found the viral belt bag that fits a Kindle, and it always goes with me. I actually had to upgrade my Christmas present this year. My husband got me a very nice purse. It was exactly what I asked for, but when I got it, I realized there was no way I was ever going to be able to make it work and still fit my Kindle in there. I am now choosing purses based on, can I fit my Kindle? Can I fit a book? How much stuff related to reading can I fit in my purse? So that's the person I am now, because I also need my headphones. I listen to audiobooks all the freaking time, and I didn't always. I never thought I would be an audiobook girly, and let me explain why. I've never been an audio person. I can't really absorb the information that way. Even in school, that made school very fun. If it was an audible lecture and someone was just talking, immediately in one ear out the other, I did not retain the information. If I read it, I remembered it. If you expected to be able to just talk at me and have me absorb that information, absolutely not. And so I assumed that reading books, listening to audiobooks would be the same way. But I am in the gym almost every day, so I got insanely tired of the same playlist that I had been listening to over and over and over. So one day, as I'm sitting in the locker room scrolling through Spotify looking for new songs to add to my playlist, I saw at the top audiobooks, and I realized as a Spotify premium member, I get 15 hours a month of audiobook listening time. And I was like, you know what, it can't be worse than listening to the same playlist again. So I chose Bride by Ali Hazelwood. There was no way I was gonna attempt to read something like Throne of Glass, ACOTAR, Fourth Wing, anything like that that has a ton of world building and a lot of characters to keep track of. There was no way. I was not that confident. But I knew Ali Hazelwood writes like STEM romance, and Bride was her first exploration into writing something fantasy related. And I was like, okay, you know what? I feel like I could maybe do this. It's still fantasy, it's still gonna keep my attention, but it's written by a romance author, and those I think are a little bit easier to wrap your head around. So let's give this a try, and I really enjoyed it. Enough to where I was like, you know what? Let's try another audiobook. Make sure this wasn't a fluke. So I chose I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. Let me tell you, I definitely recommend that audiobook because I know Jeanette from iCarly. I kind of grew up with that. And it felt like she was talking directly to me, like she was talking to a friend. And getting to hear her story in her own words, in her own voice, was something that was really, it connected. It really connected with me, and it made me really want to read more memoirs. And it really opened my eyes into how messed up the child entertainment industry is. Good Lord. But I loved it. I was obsessed with it. And then my hours for the month ran out, and I panicked. And here's the thing. I have the physical book on my shelf. It didn't matter. I wanted to hear it from her. I wanted to keep reading the audiobook. So I found it on Audible, and that's how I got started with Audible. And now I listen to audiobooks literally all the time. I don't have dead space around me. If I'm not actively engaging with somebody, I have an audiobook going. I listen to them at the gym. I listen to them while I drive. I listen to them while I cook. I listen to them while I shower. I listen to them while I'm doing like cozy gaming. And that is something I love about these particular headphones, by the way. These are the JLab Cloud Comfort ones. They're really comfortable. They are super loud. When you have them on, no one can hear you. My husband has freakishly good hearing. He had to get right up next to me, and he was like, I can hear that there's something. I can hear that there's noise, but I can't tell what it is. Wow, that sealed the deal for me. But something else I really love about these is that they have a noise cancellation feature that you can turn on and off. So when I'm working and I need absolutely zero distractions, or if the dogs are going crazy and barking, or like tonight there's going to be fireworks, I can turn the noise cancellation on and just be involved in my book. But if I'm like out in public, like at the gym, and I need to be aware of what's going on around me, or when I'm cozy gaming and I still want to be able to hear what's going on in my game, I can turn that feature off and still be able to hear past my headphones. These are the best things ever. Not that this really matters, but another cool thing about these is that the charging cable that comes with them, the color matches. I just think that's cool. But yeah, it would be easier to tell you when I'm not reading, when I sleep, and when I'm actively engaging with someone, if I'm having a conversation with them, or if my husband and I are watching something on TV together. But pretty much any other time, if I'm not reading a physical book or a Kindle book, I have an audiobook going. It gets me through life, and books are cheaper than therapy. Question 3, why did you start a BookTube? Well, I started on BookTok. Technically, I started on Instagram, Bookstagram, but I don't really like Instagram. I don't think I really get it. But BookTok, when I realized that I was going to self-publish my book, I wanted to have a broader audience to market it to. I had downloaded the TikTok app in 2020 and started scrolling, and that's kind of where it started. And then I started a BookTok account, and now we don't know what's going to happen with TikTok, if it's going to be miraculously saved or if it's going to end up going away. So originally I started thinking about BookTube in terms of a backup option in case TikTok goes away, but I'm starting to realize that I'm liking the idea of creating more long form YouTube content, because within TikTok you're pretty limited. I would almost always film within the TikTok app because, like I said, I spend almost every day in the gym. I don't understand the people that wear makeup to the gym. Like, if you're one of those people, good for you. I could never, because when I'm at the gym, I'm there to work. Like, get those gains. I could never wear makeup and be like sweating underneath all that makeup. My skin would be so broken out. I could not. So filming directly within the TikTok app allowed me to put a filter on so that I could feel better about not wearing as much makeup. However, filming directly within the TikTok app means that you're limited not only to 10 minutes of posting time, but also 10 minutes of filming time. And I like to chatter. Also, if I get stuck, if I start tripping over my words, if I make mistakes, it's hard to reset yourself and keep going. Kind of like this. I will edit a lot of this stuff out, but sometimes it's hard for me to not trip over my words and to keep everything flowing really smoothly. I have issues with eye contact, so a lot of times you'll see me like look away, and I have to reset and reshoot whatever I just said so that everything looks nice and professional. And that's really hard to do within 10 minutes in the TikTok app. Additionally, when I do like reading wrap-up videos at the end of the month, in November, I read 13 books. That's less than a minute per book. And if it's a really good book, sometimes I might... Did you see that? Me looking away? I do that. And it's hard. It's hard to remember not to do that. So I read 13 books in November. And if it's a really good book, sometimes I might talk for longer than a minute. If it's a really bad book, I might talk for longer than a minute. And it's really hard to find that balance when you're only working with 10 minutes of film time. So I really feel like making long form YouTube content is going to be a better match for what I like to do. I don't remember what number question we're on. So favorite genres and genres you don't read. I wouldn't say that I don't read certain genres. I don't read a lot of sci-fi. It's just not something that really grabs my attention. But that being said, I did read Ice Planet Barbarians and I loved it, and I can't wait to read the rest of them. And no one can say that's not sci-fi, but it's not something that I typically go out of my way to read or even watch on TV or movies, but there's exceptions to every rule. I also don't read a lot of lit fic, but again, exceptions to every rule. I would say that I don't read a lot of splatterpunk, and it's not that I have a problem with it, because I will watch gory movies. I will watch things like The Green Inferno, I Spit on Your Grave, Would You Rather. I have no problem with gory content. I have a problem with bad writing and no plot. And unfortunately, a lot of splatterpunk books they are focused and they are driven entirely by the shock factor. Honestly, at a certain point, it just becomes about how much can I shock people? How much can I gross people out? And you can do that and still have an amazing plot. There are plenty of movies that pull that off. And I feel like when you have to rely solely on shock value and gross factor, you're overcompensating for a lack of plot and poor writing. That's just my opinion. If you feel differently, that's great. I've had people rip me to shreds over that opinion. I'm not going to change that opinion. There are some really bad authors out there that all they write are splatterpunk and they're really poorly done. And I'm not going to apologize for not liking them or for not recommending them. But moving on to happier subjects, favorite genres. Definitely fantasy. I've been a fantasy reader my entire life. I will read fantasy, I will read romantasy, I will read romance, I will read dark romance, I will read dark fantasy, I will read horror, I will read mystery, I will read thrillers, I will read memoirs. It depends on the person. Am I missing anything? I will say I don't read a lot of dark academia. I did read the Atlas 6 this year. I listened to it as an audiobook even though I had the paperback. Maybe I needed to read and listen at the same time. That's what I did with Fourth Wing and Iron Flame is I listened to the dramatized audio as I was reading the book itself, and I loved doing it that way. And that's what I'm also doing with Quicksilver. I'm listening to the audiobook while I'm reading the actual book. Maybe that's what I needed to do with this because the audiobook, I had it up until the very last minute. I borrowed it from my library through Libby and I had it right up until the end because I had to force myself to get through it. Now, don't misunderstand me. I absolutely will DNF books, but because I got it through the library and I waited weeks for it, I knew if I ever wanted to go back to it, I wasn't going to have immediate, easy access to it. So I wanted to get through it. And I feel like if I had just read it, I feel like I would have gotten too bored with it. I feel like I would have just started falling asleep during it. It did have its moments. I gave it like 2 stars. It did have its moments. The girl that can talk to plants, she was the best thing about this book, but I don't know. I really wanted to like it because I hear so many people talk about it. I hear so many people recommended it and I really wanted to like it. So one thing that you need to know about me is I will always say try something twice, because how many times have you gone to a restaurant that you know is good? You've been there before, you've been there tons of times, and you go one day and it's just off and you're like, I feel so bad for anyone that this is their first experience with this because it's not usually like this. And it's like that, you know, with anything, whether it's a restaurant, a bar, or a coffee shop, or even a movie, even authors. There are certain authors where I'm like, I will read anything that this author writes, but I can't believe they published this. This is not the quality standard. I've said that about some of my favorite authors. Hot take. I feel that way about Never Lie by Frida McFadden. I do not understand why people go crazy over it and why so many people recommend it. I'm like, I hope this isn't people's first experience with Frida. That and The Locked Door. I'm like, if those had been my first experience with Frida McFadden, I would very likely never pick up another Frida McFadden book. But she's one of my favorite authors, so that's why I will always say try something twice, just in case the first time was a fluke. So on that note, please let me know if you have any dark academia recs for me. I've heard some people refer to One Dark Window as dark academia. I don't know if I would agree with that, but I loved the Shepherd King duology. So take that information and do with it what you will. But please let me know if you have any dark academia recommendations for me because I would really love to enjoy it. Maybe it's just this book. Maybe this book isn't the one for me. Maybe this author isn't the one for me. So let me know if you have better recommendations for me. Additionally, Fireborn by Rosaria Munda. I really wanted to like this book. I wanted to read the entire Aurelian Cycle trilogy before reading Fourth Wing, just in case Fourth Wing lived up to the hype, which for me, it absolutely did. This is another like Dragon Rider Academy type of book. Romance, not spice. which isn't a problem. I love young adult books. Some of my favorite books are young adult. It doesn't have to be spicy to be good. That's not the problem. The problem is that it is very, very, very plot driven. I like more character driven. That's not to say that this was bad. Throne of Glass is very plot driven over character driven. That's why people are split down the middle on whether they're an ACOTAR person or a Throne of Glass person. Because ACOTAR is very character driven. Throne of Glass is very plot driven. That's not to say that either one is bad. Did I love Throne of Glass? Yes, I did, but I loved ACOTAR more. So this was very plot driven. It definitely had its moments, and when it did, I flew through it and I loved it. It did not have enough of those moments to get me super excited about reading the rest of the series. I do have the second and third books. I do plan on reading them. I'm just not in any hurry to do so. Next question is favorite book. If I had filmed this video about 6 months ago, I would have said Court of Mist and Fury. I always said that it was going to take something really special to knock that out of first place. Lights Out by Nevessa Allen. This book is perfection. It is 6, 7, 8, 11 stars. All the stars. I will accept zero criticism on this book. I own this book in multiple formats. I own the audiobook, I own the Kindle book, and I wasn't supposed to have the physical book. I went and picked my husband up from work. He saw a half-price books bag. He was like, "What did you get?" I decided I could not continue living in a world where I did not have a physical copy of this book. I want every special edition of this book. I contacted the publisher of this book to request an arc of Caught Up, I think is the name of the second book. I will read anything that Nevessa Allen writes and consider myself incredibly privileged to do so. You can see how many times I've kissed this book because there is lipstick on my pages. That's okay with me because I will happily buy 20 copies of this book. This book is everything. This book is perfection. This has become my favorite book of all time. And yes, you need to read the audiobook. But I have a ton of recommendations in every genre. I have a favorite in every genre, but I'll make that a different video. I've added a couple of my own questions to the Book Talk Newbie tag, one of which being, what is the worst book you've ever read? I'm not even sure I have my copy of it on my bookshelf. I have no idea where my copy of it is, and quite frankly, I don't care. Unfortunately, it was sent to me directly by an author. I will never discourage people from writing books. There are some people that just shouldn't write books, and if they have ideas, they need to hire a ghostwriter. This book was awful. It was called Original Sin. I'll put a picture of the cover. This book was so bad. It was so bad. I can tell you with 100% certainty that every single 5-star review that this book has is someone that knows the author, because there are constant errors, typos, tense changes on the same page. She would go from present tense to past tense, back to present tense on the same page, and it does that the entire way through the book. There's no character development or character growth whatsoever. And you always hear that phrase, show us, don't tell us. In one chapter, the main character is like flirting with a boyfriend. By the next chapter, she has this boyfriend, and by the chapter after that, they're breaking up. And she talks about how good of a kisser he was, talks about their relationship, and I'm like, this is a really thin book. You had space, you had time, you had room to give us those details. I did not care about the characters whatsoever. It was just a really horribly written book, and I feel so bad saying that. I even asked the author, because I wanted to verify before I said anything, before I ever opened my mouth. I wanted to verify everything. I asked if she had an editor. She said no. She only used Grammarly, and she told me that one of her, I think she said beta readers, had a degree in English Lit, and I'm like, yeah, she never finished that degree. And if she did, she needs a refund, because no one would ever read this book cover to cover and tell you that it was okay for publication as it was. There are too many errors. There, like, just no. And I am so sorry. I feel like the world's worst human being saying that, especially as an author myself, but I just can't. I'm sorry. But moving on to the next question, what do I write? My husband has the good copy of my book because he's working on the cover for the second book. He did my cover art. This is my book. Heart of Fire and Darkness, Dragons, Elemental Magic, Found Family, Fated Mates, Chosen One, Spice, Fae, Elves, Pixies, Dwarves, War, Training Sequences, Connection with Your Animals, Betrayal in the second book, even more, including eyes on me. So this is high fantasy. It is my baby. I have finished book 2. Book 2 is being edited. The cover design is being done. I am working on book 3. Book 3 is the planned end. I plan on it being a trilogy. Depending on reception, I may write a spin-off sequel, but it is planned to be a trilogy. I am also working on a contemporary romance. I know some people kind of look down on like multi-genre authors, but look at Ali Hazelwood. She did it well. Like, I think as long as you read within the genre that you're writing, I think you should be able to write it. I have an idea for a really cool sci-fi book. I don't really read sci-fi. So regardless of how cool I think the idea is, if I don't even read it, I definitely have no business writing it. So, you know, maybe I'll hire a ghostwriter one of these days, or maybe I'll find a sci-fi writer that I really like, and maybe I'll pitch my idea to them and give them my baby, you know? I feel like as long as you read within the genre that you write and you really enjoy it, I feel like you should be able to write within that genre. You shouldn't be limited to, well, you write fantasy books, you can only ever write fantasy books. That's like saying you're a female author, you can only ever write female main characters. Or you're a person of color author, you can only write person of color characters. Or you're a straight author, you can't write any LGBT characters. No. Just no. So moving on to some random things about me that you might want to know. I am 30 years old, almost 31, married to the love of my life. We do not have children yet, not for lack of trying. I had a chemical pregnancy in October of 2022. We have not had any success since then. Thank you, PCOS. And on that note, I am a chronic illness warrior. I have asthma, I have scoliosis, I have fibromyalgia, I have PCOS, which is also the reason that no matter what I do, and I spend almost every day in the gym, I can't lose weight. I have POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, so that's fun. I have celiac disease. I may also have endometriosis. However, that is a much more complicated and expensive medical diagnostic process. The only ways to really diagnose endometriosis are through exploratory surgery, which I don't want surgery if I don't need it, and I also can't afford it, or an MRI, which is $10,000, which I also cannot afford. And it doesn't really matter because the only treatment for endo is to go in and surgically remove that tissue, which again, don't want it if I don't need it, can't afford it even if I did want it. So having the diagnosis would not change my situation at all. I also have several significant mental health struggles as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and apologize to you now. I do have a tentative posting schedule, things that I want to post. However, I live on the world's worst roller coaster. Okay, I have my ups and downs multiple times a day. So there will be times when I am so pumped, I am so ready, I want to film all these videos, I want to do all the things, I want to be successful and post everything, and like I am so passionate about doing this, and then there are other times when I'm like, why do I even bother? And those are the days when I'm like, are we getting out of bed today? Like what's happening today? Are we taking a shower today? Are we taking our medicine today? And I'm not gonna be that person that is afraid to talk about that. I feel like that just adds to the stigma. So I'm gonna be completely honest with you. Today is a meh day. Yesterday was a great day. The day before that, absolutely not. I just have to play the hand that I'm dealt, which I do plan on batch shooting my videos so that on my good days I can put my whole heart into this and I can allow myself to rest and heal on my bad days. I am an animal lover. We have a beautiful basset hound, the beautiful Annabelle Lee. Can you tell I'm a Poe fan? We also have a hamster named Harley. We also have some assorted family pets. Aside from basset hounds, my favorite animal is a rhino, specifically baby rhinos. Like, are you kidding me? They are so freaking cute. I want a baby rhino. That's what I want out of life. If I win the lottery, that's what I'm doing. Aside from fertility treatments, that's what I'm doing. I'm buying a rhino. I am a huge Disney fan. My favorite Disney movie is Frozen 2. I identify really strongly with Spirit Elsa. I absolutely love horror movies. Like, those are my comfort movies. I need to relax, I need to calm down, I need to fall asleep. Guess what I'm putting on? I love all kinds of music. I have so many different playlists. I have a playlist that's all Latin music. I have one that's all country music. I have one that's all like dance EDM music. I have one that's all Christmas music. music. I have one that's all classical, one that's all like a cappella and instrumental. I have one that's all Disney songs. I have several that are like writing mood. I have one for the gym. I have literally everything. Pretty much the only thing I don't like listening to is jazz. I find it chaotic and extremely unpleasant. My favorite colors are dark royal purple, aqua blue, and gray. Night court and like witchy is my go-to aesthetic, but then I also have like moments where I'm like, I like the clean girl aesthetic, like this top that I'm wearing. I'm wearing a full face of makeup, but a lot of times if I do wear makeup, I'll do like clean girl makeup. There are even days, and these are fleeting phases of like, I'm gonna be a cottagecore girly and move into the woods. And thankfully that thought passes about 12 hours later. I met my lovely husband on a website for writers. We met with the intention of writing a story together, and that never actually happened. We always get the joke, like people always say, well, you wrote your love story together. And that's kind of true, because with the exception of 3 days that I was on a cruise and didn't have any reception, and 1 day that he was in the hospital overnight, with those 4 exceptions, we have spoken to each other every single day since we met. Not since we've been together, since we met. And that's incredible. And we have been together for almost 10 years. We got married on our 7-year anniversary to the day. We had been together for 7 years. So on our wedding anniversary this year, we will have been married for 3 years, and we will have been together for 10 years. And it's insane because my grandfather passed away the year before my husband and I met. And in a way, it doesn't feel like he's been gone for 10 years. But at the same time, I have to remember he was gone before I ever met my husband. And it's so hard to remember a time when we weren't together. So it feels simultaneously like we've been together forever, but also like no time has passed. My husband does write as well. He has not written or published a novel yet. He is a fantastic writer. I keep telling him I tell him it's not a good idea simply because marketing and getting yourself out there is very, very difficult. The publishing industry is a really difficult industry to be in. But I tell him that because it's hard to be successful. It's hard to market. But I do think that he should write books because he is a fantastic author, and I really think that people would love to read what he writes. My favorite season is winter. I live in Texas, Houston, not Houston. So basically the greater Houston area. It is hot here all the time. It feels like you've been slapped by a wet blanket that's also been in the dryer. It is hot, it is humid, and I hate it here. My husband is from Australia. We live in 2 of the hottest places on the planet, and we both like cold. We would love to move somewhere cold, and we do have a tentative plan to move to New Zealand. The 2024 election did not break our way, and immediately we started thinking, what do our options look like? Believe it or not, it might actually be easier for both of us to get long-term resident visas in New Zealand than it would be for him to simply move back to Australia and me get a spousal visa. Just from our research, that's just from our research and what it looks like might be the easiest thing for us. We decided that we were going to give ourselves the holidays to decompress, de-stress, get through all of that, and then in the new year we would start seriously looking at the job market. We have been looking at property, not that we're anywhere near ready to move, but we wanted to start getting some feelers out there for what might be there. I don't think I want to live in Auckland. You pay a lot of money for a very, very small apartment, and you're paying for the convenience of living in the city, but I live in Texas. I live in Houston. I can drive for 3 hours and still be in Houston. I don't mind a little bit of a commute, okay? Even my husband going to work every day, that's like a 45 minute drive each way. I'm okay with driving and commuting if it means that we pay less and get a bigger house or apartment. Also, it snows in certain places in New Zealand, and I want snow. I want snow so badly. Some of my alpha readers live in Canada, and they are forever sending me like videos and pictures of snow, and they hate it. They're like miserable in the snow, and I am just like, I want to live here. I would live in an igloo if you would let me. Some of that is the POTS though. Some of that is the POTS. POTS patients, typically it's dysfunction of the autonomic nervous system, dysautonomia. So basically the things that I can't control, like my heart rate, my blood pressure, my temperature, all of it's broken, so that's fun. A lot of POTS patients will have extreme sensitivity to one end of the temperature spectrum. I had a friend that had POTS as well, and she was very sensitive to the cold. She could not handle the cold whatsoever. I am very sensitive to the heat. I have had five full-blown loss of consciousness heat strokes. Not heat exhaustion, heat strokes. That was our first indication that something wasn't quite right. And then the dizziness every time I stood up and the passing out. And yeah, it's fun. It's lovely, but I do so much better in the cold than I do with the heat. My family they've become experts at trying to keep my internal body temperature down so that I don't keep having heat strokes and passing out. I want to live somewhere with snow so badly. I want to live somewhere where it doesn't get into triple digits. So if you have suggestions on that, please let me know. Now, my last question before I go, I added this one myself, which is, what is your prettiest book? It is this beautiful special edition of Until the Stars Fall. It is an absolutely stunning book. My husband bought this for me for Christmas. It is definitely the most beautiful book that I own, and I am absolutely obsessed with it. So that's it for my BookTube Newbie Tag. I have a very fun tentative posting schedule, including my at least 123 book yearly reading wrap-up. I'm hoping to end at 125, but it'll be at least 123. But let me know in the comments what kind of content you want to see. I'm here to entertain you, and I hope you'll stick around for the ride.